My name is Ember Atwood. I'm 34. 3 weeks ago, my mother stood in front of 60 people at my grandmother's 90th birthday and handed my sister a diamond ring, my brother a gold watch, and me an empty jewelry box. The room laughed. A few people looked away. My mother smiled like she'd just done the kindest thing she'd ever done. But under the table, my grandmother's hand, 90 years old, trembling slightly but deliberate, closed around mine, and she slipped a folded piece of paper into my palm. 7 words. In her handwriting. 7 words that dismantled everything my mother had spent 34 years building. Before I tell you what those 7 words said, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story, and drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where you all are when you hear this. Now let me take you back 3 weeks before that party, to the day my mother first smiled at me, and I knew something was wrong. I live in Millbrook. Small town, 1 traffic light, 2 diners, 0 pretense. I'm a landscape architect. I run my own one-woman operation, out of a rented studio apartment with a drafting table in the kitchen and soil samples in the bathroom. I'm not rich. I'm not impressive by my family's standards. But I built it myself, and that matters to me. The Atwood family runs on one principle. My mother, Judith, decides who belongs. She picks the seating chart at Thanksgiving. She determines who gets the Christmas Eve invite. She controls the group chat, the family photos, the narrative. If Judith says you're in, you're in. If she says you're out, the rest of the family falls in line. I've been out since I was 22. My sister Paige is 37. Recently engaged to Brandon Mercer, a bank branch manager with a firm handshake and a talent for agreeing with my mother. Paige is the golden child. She calls Judith every morning. She brings flowers every Sunday. She posts family photos with captions like, "Blessed beyond measure." My brother Grant is 31. He carries the family name and that's enough. He doesn't start trouble. He doesn't stop it either. And then there's me, the one who drives 4 hours round trip every Saturday to see my grandmother Dorothy. I mow her lawn, I clean her gutters, I fix the fence posts that rot every spring. I sit on her porch and drink sweet tea and listen to stories about my grandfather who died before I was born. But in my mother's version, I only visit Grandma because I want her money. That's the story Judith tells. That's the story everyone believes. Everyone except Dorothy. 12 years ago, I was 22, fresh out of college, still naive enough to think honesty worked in my family. I stopped by my mother's house to drop off a birthday card and saw a bank statement on the kitchen counter. Joint account, Dorothy Harmon and Judith Atwood. 3 withdrawals in 2 months, totaling $15,000. The memo lines, kitchen remodel, appliance upgrade, contractor deposit. My grandmother doesn't have a kitchen being remodeled. My mother does. I asked. That's all I did. I said, "Mom, does Grandma know you're pulling from her account?" Judith's face went white, then red. "You don't question your mother, Ember. You certainly don't audit her." I said, "I'm not auditing. I'm asking." That was the last honest conversation we ever had. Within a week, I became the difficult one. Judith told Paige I was jealous of the family. Told Grant I was stirring up trouble. Told the cousins I was trying to turn Grandma against everyone. The label stuck because labels are easy and truth is complicated. I didn't know it then, but my grandmother saw every bit of it. She saw the withdrawals, she saw the relabeling, she saw her own daughter begin to isolate the one grandchild who actually showed up, and she did something about it. That same year, 2013, Dorothy discovered something worse than the withdrawals. Judith had quietly added her name to the deed of the Harmon family house as a joint tenant. If Dorothy passed, the house would bypass any will and transfer directly to Judith. No probate, no questions. Dorothy called a lawyer that September. His name was Thomas Calloway, and what she built with him over the next 12 years, I wouldn't learn about for over a decade. 3 months before the party, Judith announced she was organizing my grandmother's 90th birthday celebration at the Briarwood Country Club. 60-plus guests, catered dinner, a slideshow, speeches from the family. She called me on a Tuesday evening. Her voice had that particular sweetness she uses when she needs something. "Ember, I need you on caterer, slideshow, flowers, and DJ Paige and I will handle speeches and seating." "Am I giving a speech?" I asked. Pause. It's a family tribute, honey. We need people who are close to Grandma. I let that sit. The woman who drives 4 hours every Saturday isn't close enough. The woman who chose a matching dress isn't close enough. But the daughter who sees Dorothy maybe 3 times a year, she'll speak. I swallowed it. I called my grandmother instead. Grandma, did you know Mom's planning a party for you? I heard. Dorothy's voice was even, calm. She told me last week. Are you okay with it? Come to the party, baby. That's all I need from you. Something in her tone made me pause. She sounded like a woman who already knew the ending to a story still being told. I would have left it there, but that Friday, I called Paige about the florist. She didn't pick up, and the call went to voicemail late, long enough for me to hear her talking to Brandon in the background. Mom's doing the jewelry thing at the party. It's going to be so good. Brandon laughed. Paige's voice, lower. She finally gets what she deserves. Nothing. The voicemail beeped. I saved it. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why. 2 weeks before the party, I picked up Dorothy for what she called an appointment. She didn't say where. I assumed the doctor, her usual Tuesday slot. But instead of turning left on Route 9, she pointed right. First National, on Main Street. The bank? I need to take care of something. I parked. She walked in steady, her cane for balance, not for need. I sat in the lobby reading a magazine about lake houses I'd never afford. She disappeared into a private office with a bank officer for 15 minutes. When she came out, she pressed something small and cold into my hand. A key. Brass. Flat. The kind that opens a safety deposit box. Keep this in your purse, just in case. In case of what? She looked at me, direct, sharp, the way she looks when she's 3 moves ahead in checkers. In case you ever need to open what's yours. I didn't press. My grandmother speaks in her own time, and you learn to respect that. On the drive home, she was her usual self. She pointed out the Hendersons' new mailbox. She asked if I had any good projects coming up. She hummed along to Patsy Cline on the radio. But once, just once, she went quiet and said, "You remind me of your grandfather. He never cared about the shiny things either." I squeezed her hand at the stoplight and thought she was being sentimental. She wasn't. "I couldn't give you this key earlier," she'd tell me months later. "If your mother found it, she'd have tried to unravel everything. I needed to wait until the moment was right. The moment was 2 weeks away." I spent the next week doing math, not financial math, emotional math. If I sit at that party and my mother hands me nothing in front of 60 people, what do I lose? Money? I don't care about the jewelry. I never wore rings and my ears aren't even pierced. But it wasn't about jewelry. It was about the story being told in public. The narrative Judith had been writing for 12 years would get its final chapter, in front of my grandmother's friends, our extended family, Brandon's parents, the church ladies, the neighbors. Everyone. The story would be, Ember is the difficult one. Ember doesn't deserve what the others deserve. Ember is worth an empty box. And if I sit there and smile, I'm co-signing it. I'm agreeing with her. I'm telling 60 people, and myself, that my mother's version is the true one. There was something else too. Judith had been slowly limiting my access to Dorothy. "Mom needs rest. Don't come this Saturday. She's tired. Maybe space out your visits." Each request reasonable on its own. Together they formed a wall. And if I let the party humiliation slide, Judith would have the social proof she needed to finish the job. The difficult daughter who got nothing and still came around? Clearly she's only after the money. Cut her off entirely. So here's what I was staring at. Losing my dignity, losing my grandmother, and losing the only family member who ever made me feel like I existed. 60 people were about to watch my mother tell me I was worth an empty box. And if I said nothing, every single one of them would believe it. I almost didn't go. Almost. But Dorothy asked me to come. And I keep my promises. 4 days before the party. Judith summoned us to her house for a logistics meeting. The dining table was covered in seating charts and sample menus. Paige sat with her legs crossed, scrolling through fonts for the program. Grant leaned against the counter, eating grapes. Judith handed each of us a printed timeline. "After dinner, I'll give a short speech, then we'll do the jewelry presentation." "Presentation?" I said. "I'm dividing some of Grandma's heirloom pieces. she smiled. The diamond engagement ring goes to Paige, since she's building a family, and it represents commitment. The gold pocket watch goes to Grant. He carries the Atwood name. And me? Her smile widened. Something special. Paige covered her mouth. Not to hide shock, to hide a grin. What is it? I asked. It's a surprise, sweetheart. I looked at Grant. He was studying his grapes like they held the secret to cold fusion. He wasn't going to say a word. After Judith left the room to take a phone call, I started gathering my things. Paige leaned over. You should be grateful Mom's including you at all. Most people in your position wouldn't even get an invitation. I stopped. My position? You know what I mean. Yeah, Paige. I do. That was the first time anyone in my family said it out loud. Not the difficult one. Not the troublemaker. My position. Like a rank. Like a caste. There was a hierarchy, and I was at the bottom, and everyone in that kitchen knew it. Grant popped another grape into his mouth and said absolutely nothing. I drove home with both hands white on the steering wheel and a clarity I hadn't felt in years. That evening I drove to Dorothy's. She was on the porch, where she always is when the weather's good, rocking chair, wool blanket on her knees, a glass of iced tea sweating on the railing. I sat down next to her and told her everything. The timeline, the jewelry, Paige's comment. Something special. Dorothy didn't flinch. I know. You know? Paige told me last week. She was bragging. Didn't even realize what she was giving away. I stared at her. And you're okay with this? Your mother thinks she owns what was never hers. Dorothy set down her glass. She's been playing with costume jewelry her whole life and calling it real. She just doesn't know it yet. Grandma, what does that mean? She reached over and took my hand. If anything happens, anything at all, call Thomas Calloway. He's my attorney. He has everything. What everything? She squeezed once. Firm. Promise me one thing, baby. Whatever your mother does at that party, don't react. Don't cry. Don't argue. Just wait. Wait for what? For the truth to do its own work. I sat with her until the lightning bugs came out. She hummed. I tried to breathe. She wasn't scared. She wasn't angry. She was something else. Something I didn't have a word for until later. Prepared. She was prepared. I promised her I wouldn't react. I promised I'd wait. And 3 days later, sitting in that ballroom with an empty box in my hands, and my mother's smile burning across the room, I understood exactly why she needed me to keep that promise. The day of the party arrived like a verdict. Briarwood Country Club, white tablecloths, peony centerpieces, a rented projector cycling through 60 years of Dorothy Harmon's life. I'd spent 3 days building that slideshow. Every photo scanned by hand. Every transition timed to Ella Fitzgerald because my grandmother loves Ella Fitzgerald. 63 guests. The Harmon side filled 2 long tables. Aunt Margie with her reading glasses on a chain, Uncle Phil in his one good blazer, a parade of cousins I see once a year. Brandon's parents sat near the front, polished and smiling. Church friends clustered near the dessert table. Neighbors from Maple Lane took the seats by the window. Judith arrived last. Black dress, pearl earrings, the kind of entrance that expects applause. She floated through the room accepting compliments on the party she didn't plan. Oh, you organized everything so beautifully, Judith. Of course. She touched her collarbone. Family is everything to me. I stood in the corner adjusting a flower arrangement that didn't need adjusting. Nobody thanked me. Nobody looked. The 3 velvet boxes sat on a small table near the podium. 2 were wrapped in ivory ribbon, new, polished, elegant. The 3rd was older, no ribbon, slightly scuffed. It looked like an afterthought because it was supposed to. Dorothy entered on Uncle Phil's arm. 90 years old, back straight, eyes scanning the room like a general surveying a field. She wore her sage green dress, the one she saves for occasions that matter. She found me across the room. Our eyes met. She gave me the smallest nod. I nodded back. And the room settled in for what everyone thought was a birthday party. Judith took the microphone after the entrees were cleared. She stood in front of the projector, Dorothy's wedding photo glowing behind her, and delivered a speech she'd clearly rehearsed in front of a mirror. Tonight is about legacy, She paused for effect. About what our mother taught us? About the importance of passing down what matters to the people who carry it forward. A few people nodded. Aunt Margie smiled politely. Mom asked me to do something special tonight. Judith looked at Dorothy. She asked me to distribute some of her most treasured pieces of jewelry, pieces that represent our family's history, our values, and our love. I watched Dorothy's face. Stone. Absolute stone. She didn't nod. She didn't shake her head. She sat perfectly still with her hands folded on the tablecloth and her jaw set like concrete. Nobody noticed. They were watching Judith, which was exactly the point. Judith had turned her mother's birthday into her own stage. Legacy isn't just about memory, Judith continued. It's about who deserves to carry it forward. She let that word, deserves, hang in the air like smoke. The audience applauded. Brandon's mother leaned over and whispered something to his father. Paige dabbed her eyes with a napkin, preemptively. Grant sat up straight for the first time all evening. I sat at table 6, the far table, naturally, with my hands in my lap and a pulse rate I could hear in my ears. Under the table, my purse held a brass key I didn't fully understand and a promise I was about to be tested on. Judith picked up the first velvet box. My grandmother's eyes never left mine. Paige. Judith's voice cracked with practiced emotion. She opened the first box and lifted a ring into the light. It caught the chandelier and threw tiny prisms across the tablecloth. Because you're building a family. Because this ring represents commitment. Because Grandma would want you to have it. Paige stood. Tears, real or excellent, streaming down her face. She hugged Judith. Camera phones went up. Brandon's mother clasped her hands to her chest. Applause rolled through the room like a wave. Dorothy sat motionless. Judith set the second box in front of Grant, a gold pocket watch, heavy in its case. Grant, because you carry our family name forward. Because legacy needs a keeper. Grant smiled, put it on, held it up for the room. More applause. Uncle Phil gave a thumbs up from across the room. 2 boxes opened, 1 left. The room began to notice. A few heads turned toward me. Whispers traveled between tables like a current. The third box was smaller than the other 2. Older. No ribbon. Sitting slightly apart, as if even the table didn't want to claim it. A woman I didn't recognize leaned toward her husband. What's in the last one? Judith heard her. She was supposed to hear her. This was the architecture of it. The build, the pause, the audience leaning in. My mother turned to me. Our eyes locked across 4 tables and 34 years of silence. She picked up the box. She walked it over. Slow. Every step calibrated. The room went quiet. Not peaceful quiet. The quiet before something breaks. She set it in front of me, and 63 people held their breath. And for you, sweetheart. My mother's voice carried that particular sweetness she reserves for public cruelty. The box it all came in. After all, you always said material things don't matter. I opened it. Empty. Worn velvet lining. The impression where a ring once sat. The outline where a watch once rested. Ghosts of jewelry that had already been given to someone else. A few people laughed. The uncomfortable kind. The kind that comes out before the brain can stop it. One of Brandon's colleagues let out a low whistle. A church friend covered her mouth. Judith stood there, glowing. Paige looked at her plate. Grant swallowed hard and reached for his water glass. My hands trembled. My throat closed. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stand up, to say something, to throw the box across the room and let 34 years of silence crack open on this polished floor. But under the table, a hand. Thin, warm, papery skin and the faintest squeeze. My grandmother's fingers pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm. I closed my fist around it. I looked at Judith, at the room, at the empty box. Thank you, Mom. 2 words, flat, steady, the opposite of what she wanted. Judith's smile flickered, just for a second. She'd expected tears, a scene, the difficult daughter proving she was difficult one final time, and instead she got 2 words and a closed face. The room exhaled. Someone coughed. A fork scraped a plate. The DJ, confused, started the next song too early. 63 people watched me receive nothing. But in my fist, folded between my fingers, were 7 words that would change everything. I excused myself. The hallway to the restroom was long and carpeted and smelled like lilies. I locked the door, leaned against it, opened my hand. The paper was small, torn from the corner of a notepad, folded twice. Dorothy's handwriting. Blue ink. The letters steady despite 90 years of living. 7 words. Everything real is already in your name. Below it, a phone number, and 1 word. Calloway. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. Everything real. Already. In your name. I pressed the note against my chest and stood there in that locked bathroom while the DJ played Fly Me to the Moon on the other side of the wall, and my mother accepted congratulations on a ceremony she'd designed to break me. The key. The safety deposit box at First National. Calloway. The attorney Dorothy mentioned on the porch. He has everything. I didn't understand the full picture yet, but I could feel the edges of it, the shape of something my grandmother had been building quietly, carefully, for a very long time. I splashed water on my face, straightened my dress, folded the note back up, and tucked it into my wallet behind my driver's license where no one would look. Then I walked back into that ballroom and sat down at table 6 and smiled at a cousin who asked if I was okay. I'm fine. It's Grandma's night. 7 words and my grandmother's handwriting. That was all I had, and it was more than Judith had given me in 34 years. Across the room, Dorothy watched me return. She didn't smile. She didn't wink. She just looked at me the way you look at someone when you've already made sure they'll be all right. The rest of the party was strange. I moved through it like a swimmer, present, but not quite touching the bottom. I talked to my cousin Darlene about her new puppy. I complimented Uncle Phil's blazer. I ate a slice of the lemon cake I'd ordered from the bakery on 5th Street. And I waited. Judith watched me from across the room. I could feel it, the way you feel someone staring at the back of your neck. She was waiting for the collapse, the tears in the parking lot, the angry phone call on the drive home. She had built the evening around a reaction, and the reaction wasn't coming. She intercepted me by the dessert table. You're handling this well, Ember. There's nothing to handle, Mom. Her eyes narrowed. I just want you to know, this wasn't personal. Of course not. She searched my face for a crack, found nothing, walked away with her shoulders tighter than when she arrived. Aunt Margie found me near the coat room. She's Dorothy's younger sister, 78, sharp as a tack, no patience for theater. That wasn't right, Ember. She said it quietly, the way people speak when they're ashamed of their own family. That wasn't right, and everyone in that room knows it. It's fine, Aunt Margie. It's not fine, but I know you already know that. She squeezed my arm and left. At the end of the night, I found Dorothy at her table. She was sitting alone, her fingers tracing the edge of her water glass. Everyone else had gone to collect their coats. Our eyes met. She gave me that nod again, small, certain. You did good. I held her gaze and thought, whatever you've done, Grandma, I trust you. The drive home was dark. Route 9 at night is just headlights and silence, and the occasional deer frozen at the shoulder. Dorothy sat in the passenger seat with her hands in her lap. She didn't speak for the first 20 minutes. Neither did I. The kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. Then, without turning her head, the box wasn't empty, baby. It never was. My grip tightened on the wheel. What did you do, Grandma? I did what I should have done years ago. The day your mother first made you cry at that dinner table. I made sure you'd never need her again. I felt my eyes sting. I blinked hard. The road blurred and came back. Call Calloway Monday morning. He'll explain everything. And Ember, don't tell your mother. Not yet. Why not? Because the truth doesn't need an announcement. It just needs time. I helped her inside, hung her coat, settled her into the armchair by the window, the one my grandfather built 40 years ago. I tucked the wool blanket around her knees and put her tea where she could reach it. As I was leaving, she caught my wrist. Her grip was stronger than you'd expect from a woman her age. You were always my favorite, not because you were perfect, because you were real. I made it to my car before I started crying. Not the crying you do when something hurts, the crying you do when someone finally says the thing you've been waiting your whole life to hear. Monday was 48 hours away. I didn't sleep either night. I just lay there in the dark with a brass key in my purse and a folded note in my wallet, and the sound of my grandmother's voice saying, "Real, real, real." So at this point, I'm lying in bed, staring at the ceiling with a folded note in my wallet and a key in my purse, and no idea what Monday is going to bring. Here's what I want to know from you. Option 1. You call Callaway first thing Monday morning. Option 2. You confront your mother first and demand answers. Drop a 1 or a 2 in the comments. And honestly, I understand both choices. Now let me tell you what I actually did. Monday, 8:01 a.m. I was already holding the phone. 1 ring, 2, a woman's voice. Professional, warm. Callaway and Associates. This is Ember Atwood. Dorothy Harmon is my grandmother. She told me to call. A pause. Then, "Oh, Ms. Atwood, yes, Mr. Callaway has been expecting your call." Expecting. Not, "Let me check his schedule." Not, "Can I take a message?" Expecting. Like a seat had been saved for me at a table I didn't know existed. "Can you come in at 2 o'clock today?" I could. It was a 4-hour drive. I'd make it. On the road, somewhere past the county line, my phone rang. Judith. "Ember, we should talk about the party." Her voice was measured, controlled. The voice she uses when she's checking for structural damage. "I think you handled it really well." She was gauging me, testing whether I was going to make trouble. "Thanks, Mom. I just want you to know it came from a place of love." The box was symbolic. "I know." "Good." A beat. "We should do lunch sometime." "Sure. Talk later." I hung up and merged onto the highway. That was the last normal conversation Judith and I would ever have. Callaway's office was above a hardware store on Main Street, second floor, brick building, the kind of place that smells like old paper and strong coffee. His secretary, a woman named Louise, offered me water. I took it with both hands because my fingers were shaking. Thomas Callaway came out to greet me himself, mid-60s, gray beard, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He shook my hand and held the door open like he'd been waiting 12 years to do it. He had. He opened a thick manila folder on his desk and laid it flat. "Your grandmother established an irrevocable trust in September 2013. I need you to understand what that means. Once it was signed, the assets inside it no longer belong to her. They belong to the trust. Your mother has no legal claim. No one does, except the named beneficiary." "Who is that?" "You, Ms. Atwood." The room tilted. I set my water down before I dropped it. He walked me through it, slowly, gently, like a man who's delivered this kind of news before and understands the weight. The Harmon family house, 40 acres in Millbrook County, deeded into the trust. Appraised value as of last year, $1.2 million. Dorothy had removed Judith's name from the deed and transferred ownership into the trust before Judith even realized it was gone. A separate investment account at a different bank. Funded gradually over 12 years, $300 or $400 a month from Dorothy's Social Security and pension. Compound growth brought it to roughly $480,000. And the original jewelry collection, the real engagement ring, the real pocket watch, a brooch, a set of pearl earrings, all stored in the safety deposit box at First National. The key in my purse. Total value, approximately $1.9 million. "The pieces your mother distributed at the party are reproductions," Callaway said. "Your grandmother had them commissioned in 2012, the year before the trust was created. High quality, convincing to the eye, but reproductions nonetheless." I sat there for a long time. Not because of the money, because my grandmother had spent 12 years, alone, in silence, building a wall between me and my mother's cruelty. "She wanted you to know," Callaway said. "You were never an afterthought." "Why didn't she just say something? Confront my mother?" Callaway leaned back. "She did, in 2010. He told me the story. Dorothy sat Judith down and told her directly that she didn't approve of how Ember was being treated, that the labeling was unfair, that the financial liberties were unacceptable. Judith's response, "You're getting old, Mom. You don't understand family dynamics anymore." After that conversation, Judith began restricting my visits. Grandma needs rest. Don't come this Saturday. Maybe space out your trips. Dorothy understood something most people don't. You cannot reason with someone who controls the narrative. Judith wouldn't change. She'd retaliate. She'd play the victim. She'd isolate Dorothy further. A direct confrontation would cost Dorothy the only weapon she had: time. So she chose a different path. She went to Callaway. She built the trust. She had herself evaluated by an independent physician to document her mental capacity. Sharp, clear, uncontestable. She moved assets quietly, gradually, over years. She had the reproductions made. She waited. She told me once, Callaway said, "I can't change my daughter, but I can make sure my granddaughter never needs her." I covered my face with my hands. Then I asked the question that had been burning since the moment I unfolded that note. Why didn't she tell me sooner? I spent 12 years thinking I was alone. Callaway nodded. She asked herself that too. She told me, "That's the one thing I'd do differently, but if Ember knew, she'd confront her mother, and Judith would find a way to destroy everything before it was safe." She was right. I would have. At 22, at 25, at 30, I would have thrown it in Judith's face, and Judith would have found a way to unravel it. Dorothy protected me by letting me wait. It cost her. It cost me. But it held. Before I left, I said it clearly. I don't want to use this against them. I didn't ask for it, and I don't want revenge. Callaway respected that, but he set his glasses on the desk and looked at me directly. "Miss Atwood, the truth may come out on its own. Your sister is newly engaged. If she takes that ring to a jeweler to resize it, and she will, any reputable jeweler will identify the stone as cubic zirconia within 30 seconds. I hadn't thought of that. Same with the pocket watch. If your brother has it cleaned professionally, they'll spot it. Gold-plated base metal, worth maybe $40. How long do I have? Weeks, maybe less. These things tend to move quickly once someone gets engaged." He slid a card across the desk. "If your mother contacts you, or a lawyer contacts you, call me first. Don't respond to anything without talking to me." I thanked him, shook his hand, walked to the parking lot. I sat in my car for a long time with the engine off and the empty box on the passenger seat. I'd brought it with me. I don't know why. Maybe because it was the only thing my mother ever gave me that turned out to be exactly what it appeared to be. Empty. Honest. And now, the most valuable thing I owned. Because it led to everything. I drove home with the windows down and the radio off. My phone sat dark on the seat. No calls, no texts. Just the road and the trees and the strange, heavy knowledge that my grandmother had spent 12 years making sure I would be okay. 2 weeks. That's how long it took. Not for me to reveal anything. For the truth to reveal itself. 11 days later. A Tuesday. Paige walked into Garrison and Daughter's fine jewelry on Elm Street with the ring on her finger and a smile on her face. She wanted it resized for her engagement. She'd been showing it off for almost 2 weeks, to Brandon's family, to her co-workers, to anyone who'd hold still long enough. The jeweler, a woman named Claire Garrison, 3rd generation, put the ring under a loupe, adjusted the light, looked again, called her associate over. They conferred in whispers. Then Claire turned to Paige and said, "Miss, I want to be straightforward with you. This is a very well-made reproduction. The center stone is cubic zirconia." Paige laughed. "That's impossible. It's been in my family for 60 years. "I'm sorry, it's not diamond." The color left Paige's face. She called Judith from inside the shop. I imagine the jeweler and her associate stood very still during that call. The same week, I later learned this from Grant directly, he brought the pocket watch to a horologist in the next town for polishing. The man turned it over twice and said, "Sir, this is gold-plated over base metal. I'd put the value at about $40. Grant: "You're sure?" "I've been doing this for 31 years. I'm sure." Both discoveries. Same week. 2 fakes, exposed by 2 professionals who had no idea they were pulling the same thread. I wasn't there for either conversation. I didn't orchestrate it. I didn't tip anyone off. I was at home in my apartment, sketching a garden plan for a client in Dutchess County, when my phone started ringing. It rang 6 times before I picked up. It was Judith. "What did you do?" "No hello, No preamble, just ice. I didn't do anything, Mom. You switched them. Her breathing was fast, ragged. You've been going to that house every week. You took the real ones and left fakes. Mom. Don't mom me. I'll call the police. I'll have you arrested for theft. For what? You gave me an empty box, remember? Silence. The kind that crackles. I didn't switch anything, I said. I didn't know they were reproductions until you gave them away at the party. That's a lie. Call Grandma. Ask her yourself. The line went dead. I sat on my couch and stared at the wall. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't satisfied. I was tired. The specific kind of tired you feel when someone accuses you of the thing they've been doing all along. 2 minutes later, Paige texted, "Is this true? Did you know?" I looked at the message for a long time. I could explain. I could defend myself. I could send the voicemail I'd saved. She finally gets what she deserves, nothing. I put the phone down. Grant didn't text. Grant didn't call. Grant, consistent to the end, chose silence. That evening, I sat on my apartment steps with a cup of tea and watched the sun go down behind the parking lot of the Dollar General. Somewhere across town, my mother was realizing that the story she'd been telling for 12 years, the one where she was the devoted daughter and I was the greedy opportunist, had a hole in it. A big one, shaped like an empty box. The truth was out, and I hadn't said a word. Judith drove to Dorothy's house the next morning. I know this because Aunt Margie was there. She and Uncle Phil had stopped by to bring Dorothy a casserole and check on her garden. Judith didn't knock. She came through the front door like she owned the place, which I suppose she believed she did. "Mother, did you give Ember the real jewelry?" Dorothy was in her rocking chair on the screened porch. She didn't stand, didn't raise her voice, didn't blink. "I gave away what was mine to give. You distributed what you assumed was yours. Those were family pieces." "They were my pieces, Judith. I bought them with my own money 60 years ago. They were never yours to distribute." Aunt Margie set down her fork. "You can't do this to me," Judith said. Her voice cracked. "After everything I've done for this family." "What have you done, Judith?" Dorothy's voice was level, quiet. "You took $15,000 from my account without asking. You put your name on my house without permission. You spent 12 years calling your daughter greedy, and the only person taking from me was you." Uncle Phil stood up, put a hand on Judith's shoulder. "Judith, sit down." Judith shook him off. "She's turning everyone against me." Dorothy looked at her daughter with something that wasn't anger. It was older than anger, sadder. "No, dear, you did that yourself, at my birthday party, in front of 60 people. Judith left. The screen door slammed. Her tires threw gravel. Aunt Margie sat down hard in the porch chair and said, "Good Lord, Dorothy." Dorothy picked up her iced tea, took a sip. "She'll calm down. She always does." She was wrong about that. But she was right about everything else. Here's the thing about small towns. Nothing stays secret for long. Aunt Margie told her sister Linda. Linda told her daughter, who told 3 people at the church potluck. By the end of the week, every single one of those 63 party guests knew 3 things. 1. The jewelry Judith distributed with such ceremony was fake. 2. Dorothy had transferred the real collection, along with her house and savings, to Ember through a trust established 12 years ago. 3. The empty box, the moment Judith thought was her masterpiece, was actually the most damning evidence of her own cruelty. I didn't make a single phone call. I didn't post anything. I didn't send the voicemail. The truth moved through Millbrook the way all truths move in small towns, through casserole deliveries and church parking lots and phone calls that start with, "You are not going to believe this." The story of the empty box became the story. Every time someone mentioned Judith Atwood, the first thing out of anyone's mouth was, "Oh, the one who gave her own daughter an empty box at her mother's birthday?" Judith tried to rewrite it. "Mom's getting confused. She's 90. She doesn't know what she's doing." But everyone at that party had seen Dorothy, sharp-eyed, straight-backed, answering questions about the Depression and quoting Roosevelt. Nobody bought it. 2 of her friends from the country club stopped returning calls. The church women smiled at her on Sunday, but didn't save her a seat. Brandon's mother, I later heard, asked Paige some very pointed questions about the family she was marrying into. Judith's narrative, the one she'd spent decades constructing, crumbled. And for the first time in her life, she had to sit with the consequences. Nobody pushed her. The story just did its own work. Exactly like Dorothy said it would. Let me pause here because I need to know. Option 1. You think Grandma Dorothy should have told me about the trust sooner. Option 2. You think her timing was absolutely perfect. I've gone back and forth on this myself, and I still don't have a clean answer. Drop your pick below, and if you're still here at this point in the story, that tells me it matters to you. So go ahead and hit subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. Because there's still more. The following Saturday, I drove to Dorothy's. She was on the porch. Of course she was. Same chair, same blanket, same glass of tea sweating in the afternoon heat. But something was different. She looked lighter. Like a woman who'd been carrying a suitcase for 12 years and had finally set it down. How are you doing, baby? I'm still processing. She patted the chair next to her. I sat. I don't want to use this against them, Grandma. She nodded slow. Then don't. Use it for yourself. What does that mean? It means come home. She gestured at the house behind us. The peeling porch rails, the sagging gutters, the garden beds choked with clover. This is yours now, legally. Has been for 12 years. I stayed because I love it here. But it needs someone younger. Someone who knows what to do with 40 acres and a good piece of land. Something clicked. My business, landscape architecture, had been growing but limited by my tiny apartment studio. Clients wanted to see designs in person. They wanted to walk through gardens, touch the stone samples, see the plantings at scale. 40 acres. You want me to move here? I want you to build something here. Something that's yours. Not your mother's, not the family's, yours. I didn't say yes immediately. I drove home and sat with it for 3 days. Then I called my landlord and gave notice. 2 weeks later, I was on Dorothy's porch with a paintbrush and a 5-gallon bucket of Sherwin-Williams in a color called Quietude. I repainted the railings, fixed the fence posts, planted peonies along the front walk, the pink ones Dorothy loves. She sat in her chair, watching me work, and smiled the kind of smile you wait 90 years to earn. Judith hired a lawyer. Of course she did. His name was Warren something, a litigator from the next county who charged $300 an hour and drove a car that was 2 payments from repossession. Judith told him her elderly mother had been manipulated by a scheming granddaughter. She wanted to contest the trust. Warren reviewed the file, called Calloway, requested documentation. 2 weeks later, he called Judith back. Mrs. Atwood, this trust was established 12 years ago with full legal capacity documentation. Your mother's attorney had her evaluated by an independent physician at the time of signing. The trust is irrevocable. There is nothing to contest. But she was coerced. By whom? Your daughter was 22 at the time. She had no knowledge of the trust. There's no evidence of undue influence. No procedural deficiency. I'm sorry. This was done properly. Judith fired him. Tried another lawyer. Got the same answer. Calloway, on Dorothy's instructions, sent Judith a cease and desist letter. It was 4 paragraphs long and written in the kind of precise legal language that leaves no room for interpretation. Any further harassment, defamation, or attempts to interfere with the trust or its beneficiary would be addressed through appropriate legal channels. Judith received the letter on a Thursday. I know because Paige texted me, "Mom got a letter from Grandma's lawyer. She hasn't spoken since." That was the first time in my life I could remember my mother being silent. I didn't call her. I didn't gloat. I didn't send flowers or a card or a carefully worded message about karma. I went outside and painted the other side of the fence. The law had spoken. I didn't need to. A month later, Judith called. Her voice was different. Not soft, not apologetic, but careful. Like someone walking across ice. Can we meet? Where? Murphy's Cafe, neutral ground. I agreed. I didn't owe her this conversation, but I chose to have it. There's a difference. She was already there when I arrived. No pearls, no black dress. A gray sweater I'd never seen before. She looked smaller in it. She was stirring her coffee but not drinking it. I sat down, ordered a tea, waited. I did what I thought was best for the family, she started. Mom, stop. She blinked. I'm not here to argue about the past, I said. I'm not here to rehash the party or the jewelry or the box. I've heard your version my entire life. I don't need it again. She opened her mouth, closed it. Here's what I need you to understand. I kept my voice even. Not cold, not warm, level. I'm not going to pretend the party didn't happen. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't deliberate. You meant to hurt me, in front of 60 people. And I'm not going to carry this anger. It's too heavy, and it's not mine. She stared at her coffee. If you want a relationship with me, it starts with honesty. Real honesty. Not the kind where you rewrite what happened. Not today. I'm not asking for it today. But when you're ready, if you're ever ready. For the first time in my life, Judith Atwood had no comeback, no revision, no spin. She sat there with her gray sweater and her cold coffee, and she said nothing. I left money for both drinks, pushed back my chair, and walked out into the daylight. Paige called on a Wednesday evening. I almost didn't pick up. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to cry. Do you know how embarrassing this is? Her voice was thick, shaking. I showed that ring to Brandon's parents. His mother held it up to the light and said, "What a beautiful stone. And it's cubic zirconia, Ember. It's glass." I'm sorry, Paige. Did you know? Before I went to the jeweler. Did you know? I closed my eyes. I found out the same week you did, a few days earlier. And you didn't tell me? Would you have believed me? Silence, long enough to hear her breathing change. No, she said. I wouldn't have. We sat on the phone without speaking for 10, maybe 15 seconds. It doesn't sound long. It felt like a season. I need time, Ember. Take it. She hung up without saying goodbye. But she didn't hang up angry. She hung up tired. The kind of tired that comes when you realize the story you've been living in has a different ending than the one you were promised. 3 days later, a text. I'm not ready to talk, but I'm starting to see things I didn't want to see before. That's not forgiveness. That's not reconciliation. But it's the first honest thing my sister has said to me in 12 years. I didn't push. I didn't send the voicemail I'd saved, the one where she laughed about me getting nothing. I deleted it instead. Not because she deserved the mercy, because I didn't want to carry it anymore. Some things you hold on to because they protect you, and some things you let go because they're starting to turn you into the person you're trying not to become. Grant didn't call. He drove. 3 weeks after the jewelry revelation, his truck pulled into the gravel drive at the Harmon house while I was outside splitting hostas along the front path. He parked, sat in the cab for a full minute, then got out, walked to the porch steps, and sat down. I pulled off my gardening gloves and sat beside him. He looked at the yard, at the porch I'd repainted, at the new peonies. He didn't look at me. I always knew Mom treated you differently. I know. I just didn't want to get in the middle of it. I know that too. He turned the watch over in his hands, the fake one. He'd brought it with him. The horologist said $40. Yeah, he laughed. Not bitter, not sharp. The quiet, exhausted laugh of a man who just realized the seat he was sitting in was never as comfortable as he thought. $40. That's what I was worth. That's what Mom thought you were worth, I said. Not Grandma. He looked at me then, really looked. And I saw something I hadn't seen on my brother's face since he was a kid. The recognition that silence has a cost, and he'd been paying it his whole life without knowing. We sat on that porch for an hour. Didn't say much. Watched the tree shadows move across the lawn. At one point he picked up a paintbrush and finished a section of railing I'd left for the next day. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was two people sitting in the same place for the first time in years, and not pretending the distance between them didn't exist. It was a start. A quiet, imperfect, $40 start. The fallout landed on Judith the way weather lands. Slowly, then all at once. Her two closest friends from Briarwood Country Club, Linda Marsh and Diane Hewitt, stopped inviting her to their Tuesday lunches. They didn't announce it. They just stopped saving her chair. When Judith called, voicemail. When she texted, a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. At church, Pastor Williams pulled her aside after service and said something about family kindness and the weight of public actions. Judith told people he was being political. Nobody agreed. Aunt Margie called her directly. Margie doesn't mince words. Never has. You humiliated your own daughter in front of 60 people, Judith, and your 90-year-old mother had to clean up the mess. You should be ashamed. Judith hung up on her. But Margie's words traveled. They always do. Judith tried her standby move, rewriting. Mom is confused. She's old. This was Ember's doing. But the people at that party had seen Dorothy. They'd seen her answer questions about her childhood with perfect clarity. They'd watched her navigate the room with more grace than anyone under 70. Nobody believed the confusion angle. And the empty box, that one detail, became the shorthand for everything. Did you hear what Judith did? Always led back to the same image. A mother handing her own daughter an empty box in front of everyone she'd ever known. Judith wasn't destroyed. That's not how this works in real life. She still has her house. She still has her health. She still has 2 children who pick up the phone, even if the conversations are shorter now. But she lost the one thing she valued above everything else, control of the story. And for someone like Judith, that's not a punishment. That's an identity crisis. A few weeks later, the afternoons got shorter. October was settling in, and Dorothy's porch sessions were getting briefer. She napped more, ate less, moved from the rocking chair to the armchair inside by noon. One evening, I brought her tea and sat beside her on the porch. The maples along the drive were turning, orange and rust, and that particular shade of red that only lasts a few days before the wind takes it. She reached for my hand. I gave it. I held on long enough to make sure you'd be okay. Grandma, let me finish. She squeezed. 12 years I've waited to see you on this porch, looking like you belong, because you do. You always did. I couldn't speak for a moment. The kind of silence that isn't empty. It's full. Too full. You didn't just make me okay, Grandma. You made me know I was worth something. To someone. She smiled. You were always worth everything, baby. I just made sure the paperwork agreed. We both laughed. The kind of laugh that leaks through tears. What do I do now? I asked. You live. You plant things. You let them grow. She looked out at the garden, my peonies catching the last light. And you stop waiting for your mother to see what I've always seen. Some people can't. It doesn't mean what they're missing isn't there. We held hands on that porch until the fireflies came out. The crickets started up. The air smelled like fallen leaves and wood smoke from somewhere down the road. This wasn't the climax of the story. This was the heart of it. The part that all the legal documents and jewelry appraisals and cease and desist letters were built to protect. 2 women on a porch, holding hands, being real, 6 months later. The Harmon house looks different now. The porch is quietude gray with white trim. The gutters are clean. The garden beds are alive. Peonies, hydrangeas, Russian sage, a border of lavender that the bees have already found. I converted the old barn into a studio. Drafting tables, soil samples, a wall of client photos. I bring people out to the property to walk the grounds. 40 acres of demonstration gardens showing what's possible when you work with the land instead of against it. Business doubled, then doubled again. I hired a part-time assistant, a girl named Maya from the community college who wants to study horticulture. The empty box sits on my mantel, right above the fireplace, next to a photo of my grandfather in his army dress uniform and a candle that smells like cedar. I didn't frame it. I didn't mount it on velvet. I just set it there, lid open, so I can see the worn impression where the ring used to be. It's the most valuable thing I own. Because it's the thing that led me here. Dorothy still lives in the house. She's slower now. Uses the chairlift I installed on the stairs, takes her meals in the kitchen instead of the porch when the weather turns. But every evening when the light is right, she's out there, rocking, watching me work. Paige calls now. Short conversations, careful words, but real. She asked me last week about the peonies, wanted to plant some at her new place. I told her when to cut them back. We didn't talk about the ring. Grant comes by once a month. He helped me install a drainage pipe last time. We didn't talk about the watch. Judith? Judith hasn't called, but last Tuesday I found a card in my mailbox. No return address, no signature, just 4 words in her handwriting. I should have known. I'm still deciding what that means. I framed the note. It hangs next to the front door, eye level, right where I see it every morning when I leave the house and every evening when I come home. 7 words in blue ink on a torn piece of notepad paper, preserved behind glass. Everything real is already in your name. Some mornings I read it fast, like a reflex. Some mornings I stand there and let every word land. Everything. Not something, not a portion. Everything. Real. Not the shiny reproductions, not the performance, not the public display. The real. Already. Past tense. Done. Before the party. Before the box. Before I even knew to hope. In your name. Mine. Not Judith's. Not the family's. Mine. Because someone decided, 12 years ago, that I was worth protecting. And then spent every day after that making sure the protection held. I used to think inheritance was about money. About who gets the house, who gets the ring, who gets listed in the will. I don't think that anymore. Inheritance is the knowledge that someone saw you, clearly, accurately, without conditions, and chose to stand between you and the thing that was trying to diminish you, even when it cost them. Even when it meant staying silent for 12 years. Even when the person doing the diminishing was their own child. My grandmother gave me 7 words. And those 7 words gave me back something my mother spent 34 years trying to take. The belief that I matter, not because of what I own, not because of what's in my name, but because someone who loved me made sure the world would agree with what she already knew. I touch the glass every morning. Thank you, Grandma, for seeing me. And then I go outside and plant something. If you're the person in your family who gets the empty box, the one who's overlooked, last in line, expected to show up and shut up, I want you to hear something. Look closer. Sometimes the people who seem silent are the ones doing the most. Sometimes the person sitting quietly at the end of the table is the one who's been building something for you behind closed doors, in a lawyer's office, in a bank vault, in a safety deposit box you don't know exists. And sometimes the most valuable thing you'll ever inherit isn't a diamond ring or a gold watch. It's the knowledge that you were worth protecting all along. I spent 12 years believing I was alone. I spent 12 years thinking the only person who saw me was my grandmother, and that all she could do was hold my hand and say kind things. I was wrong. She wasn't just watching, she was working. Quietly, legally, strategically. She was making sure that when the moment came, I'd have ground to stand on. My mother gave me an empty box in front of 60 people. My grandmother gave me 7 words under the table. One of those gifts cost nothing and was designed to break me. The other was worth nearly $2 million and was designed to set me free. You matter. Even when the people who should tell you that are the ones working hardest to make you forget it. You matter. And if no one's told you that today, well, I just did. The empty box is still on my mantle, and every time someone asks me about it, I tell them the same thing. It was the most valuable gift I ever received. They never believe me, until I tell them the story. Now you know it too. That's my story, and I want to hear yours. If you've ever been the empty box person in your family, the one who got overlooked while everyone else got the ring and the watch and the applause, drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. If this hit close to home, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes the right story at the right time can change how somebody sees their own life. I've got more stories like this one. Check the description for the next video. It's about a woman whose family tried to erase her from a wedding. They didn't expect what she did next. I'll see you there.